Welcome to Somali Nexus, the podcast where we uncover the untold stories of Somali history, culture, and the powerful individuals who've shaped our world. And today, we're diving into a truly revolutionary figure in Somali history, Queen Araweelo. In this episode, we're exploring Queen Araweelo, Power Redefined. Araweelo wasn't just a queen, she was a symbol of transformation. In a world where gender roles were rigidly defined, she reimagined what it meant to lead, break barriers, and challenge the status quo. Her reign in ancient Somalia marked a bold shift in power, where women ruled. And gender equality wasn't just a dream, it was a reality. Her story has captivated generations, inspiring conversations about women's rights, leadership, and empowerment. From her rise to power to her controversial decisions, Araweelo's legacy continues to challenge us to think differently about leadership and equality. Join us as we explore her remarkable journey, the myths and facts surrounding her reign, and how Queen Araweelo's story still resonates today. Was she a visionary queen or a tyrant? How did her rule redefine societal norms? And what can we learn from her story in our modern fight for justice and equality? This is Somali Nexus, where we bring Somali history to life, one story at a time. If you're ready to learn more about Queen Araweelo's legacy and why her story still matters today, stay tuned and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's dive in. Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're plunging into a story, one that's really captivated minds for centuries. We're talking about a figure shrouded in both reverence and, well, a lot of controversy. Queen Araweelo of ancient Somalia. We've got a fascinating stack of sources here: oral traditions, scholarly addresses, cultural interpretations. They all paint a really complex portrait of this legendary queen. So, our mission today is to unpack what's known or what's debated and, crucially, why her story continues to spark such heated discussions even now. It's a journey into history, a myth, and maybe that enduring human struggle for justice and, transformation.
Absolutely. And what's truly fascinating here is how her narrative passed down through, countless generations has continuously shifted and adapted. We're going to explore how just one figure can embody such profound contradictions, serving as a symbol of both liberation and tyranny, depending entirely on who's telling the tale.
Okay, let's dive right in them. Our sources tell us that in Horn of Africa, where the desert meets the sea, history isn't always written in stone, it's often whispered by firelight, right? Queen Araweelo's story lives primarily through Hiddo iyo Dakon. That's the Somali term for their rich oral tradition, a living history constantly being retold.
Yeah. And this oral crucible, as some call it, is absolutely crucial to understanding her. Somali society has long been called a nation of poets, and for good reason. Before they adopted a written script, which was quite late actually, 1972 history, their legal system, the hair, all social norms, everything was memorized and transmitted orally. And this inherent fluidity means stories get subtly reshaped with each retelling.
Makes sense.
You also see different poetic genres playing roles, like the gabai. That's a prestigious form, usually by men for big political stuff.
Wow.
And then the buranbur, more often by women dealing with social life, weddings, solidarity. Even her name shifts a bit. Araweelo, Araweelo. See variations.
So, this constant flux, it makes it incredibly tricky to separate historical fact from, let's say, cultural fiction, doesn't it? Our sources lay out two fundamentally opposed origin stories for how she even came to power, which seems to reflect, as one source put it, a deep cultural schism about female authority in Somali society.
They really do clash. The first narrative, which often comes from a more patriarchal viewpoint, paints Araweelo as a royal heir, daughter of a king, no sons, so she's the natural successor. Her power in this telling is essentially granted by a man. She's an exception to the rule, which kind of reinforces the male power structure overall.
Okay, so that's one version. What about the other side of that coin?
Well, in stark contrast, the second narrative, which feels much more revolutionary, casts Araweelo as a wilderness rebel. Here she's a young noble woman, widowed after her husband dies in clan fighting, but then she's rejected by both her family and her in-laws. Why? Because she's childless, seen as useless, very. So she retreats to the wilderness, gathers other ostracized women, and they form this sisterhood forged by necessity. They learn to hunt, build, defend themselves. In this version, her power is absolutely seized through defiance and female solidarity. It's in direct opposition to the patriarchy that cast her out.
Wow. So it sounds like choosing which origin story to tell isn't just about history. It's making a political statement right from the start. It really sets the tone for how you interpret everything else she did. So the big question hangs there. Was she a real historical queen? A powerful symbol? Or maybe some kind of blend of both?
And what's really insightful here, especially with oral traditions, is that a figure's, precise historical certainty often matters less than their ability to carry deep cultural meaning. Araweelo isn't just a historical queen. She's become this living myth constantly reshaped to reflect a society's ongoing debates about power, about gender.
But there are some concrete details in the traditions, right? Geography.
Yes, that's true. Somali oral tradition is remarkably consistent about placing her kingdom in the Sanag region. That's in modern-day Somaliland or Somalia. Her capital is named Murihi, and her grave is often described as this huge mound of stones, a cairn called a tallow, which interestingly is consistent with actual archaeological features found in that region.
Okay, so geographical consistency, that's something. But you're saying direct archaeological proof for her specifically, like an inscription that's missing?
Exactly. No artifacts, no inscriptions directly naming an Araweelo have turned up. She's sort of an archaeological ghost in that sense.
So does that mean she didn't exist in some form? I know there's a theory trying to link her legend to a real person.
Ah, yes, you're probably thinking of the Gudit theory. It's quite compelling academically. Connects Araweelo to Gudit or Yodit, this really fearsome 10th century warrior queen. She's known for ravaging the Christian kingdom of Axum, which was the precursor to modern Ethiopia. We have historical accounts like from 978 AD describing a powerful non-Christian queen doing just that, and the parallels are striking. Both were powerful female rulers in worlds dominated by men. Both were seen by their enemies as, destructive, transgressive, both remembered for cruelty. So the idea is that Araweelo might be a kind of Somalized memory of Gudit, reinterpreted maybe through a lens of gender conflict rather than the original religious or ethnic conflict.
But hold on, that's a huge time difference. Folklore often puts Araweelo way back, like AD 15, Proto-Somali times, Gudit's 10th century. Some stories even say thousands of years ago. How do you bridge that gap?
Right. And that chronological fluidity, as scholars call it, is actually a hallmark of Somali oral narrative. It often prioritizes the moral, the social, the why of the story over precise historical dating. When did it happen? Less important than what it means. So the key insight is that historical precision often takes a backseat to the story's usefulness, its cultural work. Araweelo is likely a composite figure, shaped by different historical memories, different cultural needs over centuries. This lets her serve different purposes in the narrative across time.
Okay, that makes sense. It's the story that matters most. And what truly sets Araweelo's story apart isn't just whether she existed, but this incredibly radical social project she supposedly undertook. The legends talk about a complete inversion of traditional Somali patriarchy. She wasn't just looking for a seat at the table.
No, she wanted to flip the whole table over. Her political ambition, as it's told, was nothing less than establishing a matriarchy. Not just equality, but actual female dominance. The stories say she believed women were better and more efficient leaders, that they were natural peacekeepers, while men, they were the instigators, participants, and conductors of war and politics.
So, if she genuinely believed women were better leaders, how did that play out? How did she govern? What were the big, radical moves?
Well, her most famous decree, the one everyone talks about, was a direct hit on the traditional gender roles. The story goes, after her own husband objected to her public role, she ordered all women to abandon household chores, childcare, and force the men to do it instead.
Wow.
Yeah, a fundamental attack on the patriarchal family unit, the Khois, and that whole public-private sphere of separation. Beyond that, She put competent women in charge everywhere: government, military, trade, resolving disputes. Laws got changed to empower women. No more arranged marriage without consent, widow inheritance abolished. Women got land ownership, inheritance rights. Female elders started leading dispute councils.
So, it wasn't just social stuff. The legends also talk about economic development.
Absolutely. The peace her rule supposedly brought allowed for prosperity. Trade routes reopened, big investments in farming, irrigation, livestock. She promoted cooperative farming, apparently improving food security quite a bit. Women became major players in commerce, running trade caravans. She even brought in some basic taxation for public works, schools, clinics, roads. And education, especially for girls, was pushed, focusing on practical skills, ethics, even literacy. Plus, there was a cultural side, encouraging crafts, storytelling, music, dance, hosting poets, forums for ideas. A real cultural flourishing.
Okay, amidst all this potentially positive stuff, there's the element that's the most controversial, the most, frankly, chilling part, the claim that she ordered the castration of men. This is the part that really shocks people.
It is. This castration conundrum is absolutely central to her legend. And you can look at it through, well, at least 4 different lenses, each reflecting very different takes on her character and motives.
Okay, let's break those down.
First, the patriarchal view often presents it literally. Simple cruelty, misandrist. A way to cement her tyrannical rule over male opponents or prisoners. Just pure brutality.
Straightforward tyranny.
Second, some see it as strategic psychological warfare. Maybe she didn't actually do it widely, but as a cunning political operator, she deliberately fostered and weaponized the rumor of castration. Knowing male power and identity were so tied to virility, the fear of emasculation becomes this potent, maybe even non-lethal deterrent, a way to dissuade young men from perpetuating conflicts, as one source suggests.
So, using fear as a tool, whether it was real or not, the threat was powerful.
Precisely. Third, some modern analyses suggest it was all patriarchal slander, a complete fabrication, a smear campaign by her male enemies to paint her as unnatural, a man-hater used later perhaps to discourage other women from seeking power by linking female leadership with anti-male violence.
Makes sense as a tactic. And the fourth?
The fourth view, often prominent in women's retellings, sees it as feminist retribution. Not random cruelty, but a justified punishment for male violence, especially sexual violence. There's one specific story where the idea supposedly came after a woman recounted the horrific rape and murder of her daughter and pleaded for the perpetrators to suffer as my daughter suffered. In that light, emasculation becomes this act of, well, radical justice.
Heavy stuff.
It is, and what we learn here isn't just about Araweelo, maybe, but about how these extreme narratives get used, weaponized, or reclaimed by different groups. It really reveals the deep fault lines in a culture's ongoing debates.
So, despite these really extreme claims, there is that strong counter-narrative you said often from women that paints her not as a tyrant, but as a queen of peace and prosperity.
Indeed, in that view, her main goal was establishing peace, ending the devastating clan feuds that were tearing the region apart. Her approach was methodical. First, offer reconciliation. If ignored, issue a stern warning. War was the absolute last resort. She apparently oversaw building a large prison, which was a pretty new idea there for stubborn warlords. It served as both a practical tool and this powerful symbol of her authority in her court. In this version, fostered the arts, nurtured poets used oral history to try and unite communities, binding her realm together with culture, not just fear.
A reign that revolutionary must have had an equally dramatic end, I imagine. What did the story say about how she died? Like her rise, I bet her fall is also loaded with symbolism.
Oh, absolutely. The most common story involves her assassination by her own grandson, which is deeply symbolic, right? It represents the reassertion of the male line, the triumph of patriarchy. The story often goes that the grandson was raised in exile by Araweelo's estranged husband, Biki, sometimes Buchi, and he's often painted as this heroic resistant figure. Biki trains the boy, gives him the spear, pointedly described as a quintessentially male and phallic weapon, specifically to kill the queen.
Wow, not subtle.
Not at all. It signifies the triumph of male warrior skill and the restoration of the natural patrilineal order. Some versions name the killer differently, like a warlord Ode Bikai. But that core theme, a male warrior ending her reign, stays constant.
And the aftermath of her death, that sounds just as symbolic, almost like a public ritual of desecration.
Yes, exactly. Her body was supposedly tied to a horse or camel, dragged across the country. People reportedly stoned her corpse, and where a piece of her body fell, a mountain or a cairn is said to have appeared.
Turning the landscape itself into a reminder.
Precisely. A permanent testament to her defeat. It functions as a kind of mythological charter for patriarchy, justifying male dominance. And it's such a stark contrast to the respectful burials given to other revered figures in Somali tradition.
That's incredible.
And what's truly striking even today at her supposed tomb site in Sanag, men traditionally throw stones at the mound, continuing that act of rejection, while women often lay flowers or brightly colored cloth there in reverence.
A living ritual.
It's like a living microcosm, as one analysis put it, of this ongoing cultural argument over what she means.
So, despite that violent end, despite the efforts, maybe to erase or condemn her, Queen Araweelo's legacy is clearly fiercely alive today. How is she being reclaimed or talked about now in the 21st century?
Well, her name itself, Araweelo, is still commonly used in Somali society. It's often a nickname for women who are seen as assertive, dominant, maybe feisty. And it can be meant as a compliment or as a put-down, which perfectly captures her contested status.
Still divisive?
Very. But she's also been powerfully reappropriated. Especially by feminists and among the Somali diaspora, she's become this feminist icon, a symbol of natural resilience. It provides an indigenous counter-narrative to those often simplistic, usually negative, single stories about Somalis. War, piracy, victimhood. She offers something else.
Can you give us some specific examples of how that reclamation is happening?
Sure. There's an online magazine called Araweelo Abroad. It was explicitly set up as a safe space for Somali women, and they named it after her specifically as a defier of gender roles in literature. There's Ayana Dan's 2022 book, Daughters of Araweelo. It uses her name as a framework for oral histories of Somali women in Minnesota, really pushing back against those one-dimensional portrayals.
Interesting music, too.
Yep. The Somali-Canadian singer Cold Specs has a 2017 single, Fool's Paradise, directly inspired by Araweelo. She called it an empowering story, focusing on the emasculator queen aspect.
Wow.
And even in political analysis, her name gets invoked. Scholarship looking at the disruptive political power of someone like Congresswoman Ilhan Omar has sometimes cast her as a kind of modern-day Araweelo, challenging established orders.
That's a really powerful modern echo. How does she stack up against other famous African queens from history?
It's a good comparison. Like Queen Amino of Zaria in Nigeria or Queen Nzinga of Ndongo in Angola, she's remembered as this formidable military and political leader. But there's maybe a key difference. Unlike, say, Ya Asantewa of Ashanti in Ghana, who famously resisted external colonial powers, Araweelo's struggle, at least in the legends, seems almost entirely internal. It was focused on fundamentally remaking her own society from within.
I see.
Which makes her narrative uniquely centered on that idea of internal social revolution and transformation.
So the historical reality of Queen Araweelo might, forever be hidden by the mists of time and oral tradition. But her immense enduring power as a cultural text, as a story, that seems undeniable. She really is a figure of profound complexity. A queen of two faces, you could say, still resonating today.
Absolutely. She acts as both a mirror and a map, reflecting the ongoing struggles, particularly of Somali women, but also maybe pointing a way toward a more just future. Her story isn't static. It's this dynamic tradition constantly being reinterpreted to reflect and maybe even shape the struggles of the present.
And in every retelling, Araweelo forces you listening to ask some big questions. What is fair? Who gets to lead? And what happens when we dare to fundamentally change the rules of society?
Yeah, her legend really proves that a story's power doesn't always lie in its factual certainty. It lies in its capacity to hold a culture's deepest contradictions, its highest hopes, its biggest arguments. She continues to challenge, to provoke, and definitely to inspire.
Well, we hope this deep dive into Queen Araweelo leaves you with a lot to think about. Maybe inspires you to explore more of these incredible, complex figures from history and myth. Thanks so much for tuning in.